Welcome to her Life Unscripted podcast, inspiring burnt-out women and stretched-thin mamas to embrace the unscriptedness of life. Brought to you by Anna Osborne. Hello, ladies. Welcome to Her Life Unscripted, episode 13. That is wild to me that we're already at episode 13. I am super excited to be here with you today. I have to tell you that I gave myself permission to take a nap today, which may sound crazy, but I was so tired and I had this to-do list to do and I'm working today. And I thought, you know what? The world is not going to end if I kick my feet up for 20 minutes. And I am like a brand new woman. So for all of you listening that are pushing through and not paying attention to your body, I am going to give you the permission that I gave myself, which is to kick your feet up, snuggle up with a blanket and just rest for a few minutes. I just feel so rejuvenated. I'm really glad I did that. I'm really excited to be here and share this interview with you guys today. It is with the amazing and just brave Stephanie Macadaan. And she was such a fun person to be able to interview. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist in Los Angeles, California. And she really specializes in not only working with couples, but those women that are starting new after a relationship ends. And so she specializes in working with women that are going through a divorce process. And she has an amazing group that is launching in September for women, a support group for them. And she's very brave. She's very courageous. She shares about, I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to let you guys give the interview a listen and just hear the amazing perspective that Stephanie has and just all of her expertise. She was just so amazing to interview. Excited to stay connected with her and just kind of see where, her amazingness goes because she has so much to offer. And I just know she's a value to this community. And I'm really, really excited to share her with you guys. So without further ado, Stephanie Macadaan. Well, I am so excited to have Stephanie Macadaan on the podcast today. It is just an exciting day to be able to be building new connections with people that I've had just the privilege of knowing kind of peripherally. And so Stephanie and I met in actually an online group of just other amazing therapists supporting each other. And she was generous enough with her time to be able to come on the podcast. So welcome, Stephanie. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. And so, I already gave the audience a little bit of an introduction of kind of who you are and the work that you do before we got started. But now that we're recording, I just want them to be able to get to know you a little bit. And so you are a licensed marriage and family therapist, and you're down in Southern California, correct?
Yes, I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I really wanted to have you on the podcast is because this group that we're a part of, Stephanie and I are a part of, is she's working on this project to really be supporting women that are going through the divorce process, are divorced, is this idea of supporting women that are starting anew. And I just love the way that you phrased it when I was, kind of researching you online and all the great stuff that you do, is this idea of anew sounds like a dawn, like it sounds like the morning time, and there's just something about that that's very inspiring. And so do you mind sharing a little bit about, kind of the work that you do? Obviously, we'll go more into it, but just share a little bit about the audience so they can kind of get a picture of your work as well.
Yeah, well, I love working with people, but women in particular, I found are kind of drawn to looking at their lives when they've kind of gone not how they've planned. And then ways to kind of improve yourself and grow from it versus being crushed and sort of feeling like there's no hope for the future. So really using our struggles to strengthen us and lead us maybe down a path into a future that we never would have thought was possible if we hadn't had these struggles. So that's kind of sort of what my group is around too.
Neat. And so this idea of having something, especially like a divorce, something that's not what we plan when we start out and say our I do's and things like that, but that it does happen in relationships. And sometimes it's a very, very tragic thing, but ends up being a healthy thing. And so you talk about this idea of change happening so unexpectedly and this, this crossroads of does it crush us or do we find ways to heal? And so when you see, can you describe a little bit about that process of, I guess, trying to make the choice to not have it crush you? What's that look like in terms of the women that you work with?
Well, I think it's, yeah, like you said, kind of realizing that you're at this crossroads. And I think most people sort of come to therapy in particular when they're at sort of their lowest point, because just even reaching out for help and saying that you're really struggling and you need help is usually at a time when there's a lot that feels like it's going wrong. Um, but through that work, I think you can realize that we can often go through life happily and go along, but not realize that we're sort of in a rut or
Mm.
sort of stuck or sort of just missing a lot of things that maybe we really want to do or that inspire us just because we're sort of going along with the as is. When things get shaken up in our life, it's sort of this opportunity to really take a deep look and reevaluate everything. um, and it's a great opportunity hidden in all of this kind of
Mm.
tragedy and pain and turmoil. So I think all of that's super important to work through and a big step in it, but then also getting to that area where we can actually see our potential and maybe what we'd like to have different in the future as we go.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's this transition process from, like, re-identifying what you knew to be true, right? Like you said, you're just
Hmm.
going along as is, and then this huge tragedy happens, like the ending of a marriage.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things that I really learned through just my own process and all things I've gone through and working with these women is that I think we all get this idea of perfection in our mind and trying to be this perfect wife, perfect mother, perfect person. And oftentimes, when something like a divorce happens, for example, it's so um, kind of almost carries a shame with it and can really make us feel like there's something wrong with us, or we compare ourselves to other people that are still married and why aren't we and what's wrong with us. But I've really reevaluated that idea perfect and how perfect really is going through struggles and being open to learning from them, growing from them. Perfect isn't never having anything go wrong in your life and just skating through. um, so that was a big takeaway I had from
Yeah,
our work.
absolutely. I've got chills as you said that. I'm like writing notes as you're talking, but this idea of that perfect is actually the doing of it. Like that's the messy part actually means that it's the perfection in the imperfect because you're
Yeah.
choosing to go through it versus stepping back and going, "This is too big. I've got to hide away and not acknowledge that this is my new reality."
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually facing it head on. I mean, how much strength does that take? That is such a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
um, and then add on to that just being open to learning from it and growing from it versus kind of ignoring it and hoping it'll go away and staying kind of stagnant.
Absolutely. So talk about that. So you're working with women right now in a group setting. I mean, obviously you do it individual in your practice, but you've also
Yes.
launched this group. And has the group actually it doesn't matter because whenever this launches, people will be like, whenever, what space and time they're actually listening to it. But
Yes. Yes, that's
but the
right.
group that you're doing has that launched in real time when you and I are recording right now? Because I know you're getting signups for it.
Yeah, it'll be in September that it
Okay, awesome.
starts.
Okay, so
Yeah.
September of 2016 for all of you who we have no idea in the virtual world that will be listening to this. But, this idea of confronting something head on rather than kind of like ducking underneath it or kind of like gingerly trying to approach it. Like, what are some of the ways that you really work with women to be able to tackle this new identity, this gift in the devastation, like you said a few moments ago? Like, what are some of the ways that you really work with women? Because I know that there's members of my audience that can so relate to going through a divorce or just
Hmm.
in general having tragedy strike and knowing that you can't hide away from it. What are some of the ways that you work with women around that?
Yeah, and I was just going to add to it, even if it's really not a tragedy, like for me, when I was 22, I became a single mom. And it's not a tragedy, but
Mm.
it was a similar experience in that it feels kind of shameful and not accepted in many ways. So just, yeah, sometimes even things that appear to be a gift can carry a lot of,
So true.
yeah.
So true.
But I would say the first step in all of it is really gaining a lot of self awareness And I feel like that's so much that's one of the things just on a day-to-day basis, and as we kind of get just settled in life going through, that we forget about. But so when I work with women, I really like to challenge them to realize maybe ways that they're doing that, just sort of going with the flow and not really fulfilling themselves. Oftentimes we can get so lost in careers or families that we lose track of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think finding that again, our own, having a lot of awareness around, our why we do the things we do, the type of relationships that we get into, um, all of that is an important first step.
Yeah, because you've got to be able to see it before you can start diving in and doing anything with it. So this
Yes.
awareness is such a key. Even if you think about this, like you said, it's not always a tragedy, but it's a challenge, right? And I
Yes.
think
Yep.
that challenge can have a positive or a negative connotation, but this big boulder is in the way. And so before you start deciding, how am I going to move that boulder, I have to be able to know about myself. How do I problem solve? How do I reach for support? How do I put it all on my shoulders? And so that
Yes.
self-awareness process is so important in being able to even start the journey to remove the obstacle or the boulder.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. I love that analogy too, the boulder.
I'm like, it's so funny. Like the more and more that I'm, recording podcasts and things like that, I'm realizing I'm a much more visual person than I think I gave myself credit, because I'm
Yeah.
constantly throwing in these analogies. And then I get the picture in my head. I'm like, okay, now I can describe it to the audience because I can't see them. But if I can create a picture for it, then I hope that we're both on the same page as we're talking. So
Yeah.
absolutely. So what's
Yeah.
kind of the next step if you think about self-awareness as like that's the key to being able to even go on the journey? What are some of the other ways that you kind of work with women on that?
Yeah. So I think self-awareness is power.
Mm.
And so once you sort of get your own self-awareness, I think that feels very empowering. And then you're sort of able to advocate for yourself more. You have a clearer vision of what you want and why you want that. You have a clearer vision of sort of how you want your relationships to be, how you want to be treated, how you want to treat others, sort of all of that. And I think once you sort of gain all of that knowledge through self-awareness, that's a power that you can use going forward. And it's pretty amazing when you start putting it out there in the universe and seeing how it kind of comes back to you and how it sort of changes your world, really.
Mhm. Yeah.
I
Oh,
found
yeah.
that a lot. Yeah.
What do you see comes back to people when they start putting that out into the world? I love the topic of universe because it's so global for, however we want to interpret that, whatever our belief system is.
Hmm.
What do you see happens for women when they start putting out into the universe this power, like you said, that they
Yeah.
realize that they hold within themselves?
Well, I think the sort of all encompassing idea is you start getting a world that you maybe never imagined was possible.
Mm.
So you start living kind of more authentically and going for what you want. I think we don't realize before we have the self awareness how much we sabotage ourselves or how much we think we want this, but we really don't. Um, so I think we just start living more authentically, as that's part of the power in it, and it sort of draws what we want. And we realize, I think too, our own strength. We can do more than we imagined. When I went through everything I did is when I decided to go back to school and get my master's and go through the 3,000 hours of training and become a therapist. And now I have my own practice in Los Angeles. When I was like married with kids living in the suburbs, I never imagined that if someone said this is going to be your life in 6 years, I would have been like, huh? What
Yeah.
are you talking about? There's no way that could ever happen.
Yeah.
you know? So I think too, for women, if you think about that, if you think back many years ago sometimes and look at where you are now, it is pretty amazing when you see how much can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And almost this that being unrecognizable to ourselves of who we were in that, that former life or that former path we were on is actually quite an amazing thing. That if we're so recognizable to ourselves of who we were 10 years ago, that actually is something, irregardless of what our path is, that personally makes me perk up and go, wait a second, like
Yeah.
time has passed and I'm still I still think the same. I still believe the same, like everything's exactly the same. Is there other ways that I can be challenging myself to continue growing rather than seeing me as completely recognizable as a good thing instead of something that makes me pause?
Yeah. And that's what I think too, a lot of people gain through this process is you really start believing that anything is possible, that you really can make whatever you want happen. I was even joking with my son the other night that I'm going to try to be on Dancing with the Stars on the next season. He's like, "You're not going to get on that." I'm like, "Hey, like a few years ago, I wouldn't have thought this would happen, and it did. You never know."
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's fantastic.
But just keeping all options open.
Right, you never know when NBC or whatever
Yeah,
is gonna
exactly.
call, right?
Yeah.
So what are the ways, and going through, a big experience, and we're kind of talking about in the context of divorce, but I love how you kind of gave that caveat that it doesn't have to be a tragedy; it can just be something really unexpected. What are the ways? I mean, talk about dance as this way, as something that inspires you and something that is a form of self-care. What are the things that you reconnected with, kind of going through, your own process, and finding them as outlets and things that you needed to really kind of reestablish who you were and all those
Yeah.
sorts of things? What really kind of helped you along that path?
Um, so for me, the biggest thing was really reevaluating what I want versus what I was taught to want, whether it was from family or society or whatever. Um, so sort of going through that process of sort of exploring my self exploration and figuring that out. And it's really interesting because one thing I got into, which sounds so foo-foo-y and psychology, but is like the meditation
Hmm.
aspect of it. I actually started doing really venturing out and doing a lot of different things, like exploring the whole meditation thing a little bit more, just because, like I even mentioned on my website, that inner, if we can have inner calm and peace, that is very reflective of what our outside world is going to be like. And just sort of realizing it starts with me, that I need to come from a calm, more centered, knowing place in order
Hmm.
to do that. Um, so that was one aspect of it, seeing more clearly just what my own wants and needs were and separating that out. Just, I think I was so often heavily influenced by society's expectations and the pressure to live that way versus my own way. Does that answer your question? Or
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to kind of touch back to that meditation piece because I know that, what you've talked about as just you and I have been talking today is this shame or this judgment that comes from kind of that bigger society, or it may be familial about, what it means to go through a divorce, right? And
yeah,
and the shame that can come with that. And so this idea of quieting the mind, right? And turning
hmm,
inward and really being able to create inward calm, which is, one of the main goals with meditation. What I've seen with women that I've worked with, and just even, my own journey through big stuff, is that head trash, that chatter. It's like
yeah,
the volume is cranked up so high.
hmm,
And I know that the times when I've needed to kind of calm within, like you said, quiet the storm
yeah,
within, that there is apprehension of going, oh my gosh, like I'm asking myself to get quiet, but what I know is it's the internal noise that's so loud, and that can be very scary for some people
yeah.
of moving to a place of quietness. And so, what are as you were going through that process, what are some of the ways that you learned to use meditation? Because it is such a gift,
Yeah.
as this ability to go at it very slowly and cautiously, so you didn't kind of get overwhelmed with whatever head trash that was there, whether it was internally or externally, kind of filtering in.
Yeah. Well, part of it was, first of all, I noticed just in studying psychology, and there's a lot of different theories and orientations in psychology, but I noticed that pretty much every single one of them talked about meditation. So that right there showed me like, okay, this is something I need to look at more, because no matter who you listen to, that they're saying this is important. And I'm not someone that's like, going to meditation retreats or doing 3 quiet weekend, any of that. It's mine's very, very like limited, because I think it can be challenging. But I actually started with the Oprah. She and Deepak Chopra had like a 21-day meditation challenge,
Oh, neat.
and they have those often, all the time. And those are actually, I thought, was good. They did do some guided meditations, and they're like 20-minute sessions,
Mhm.
which actually sometimes can feel really long.
Yeah.
So even that. So I just really do what I can with that. And then there's some apps that I always recommend to some clients as well that are good to use for kind of on the go meditation that just works you through 2 minutes. But even if it's just breathing, that's kind of been my go to, is like breathing exercises. And then on the Oprah Deepak ones, they'll give you little mantras. So
Mhm.
I've remembered a few of those mantras. So if I'm having like a hard time getting to sleep, or if I'm somewhere and I'm stressed, I'll just remember this mantra. So hum is one that stands out because it's so easy to remember. And if I just notice I say that a few times, it just kind of refocuses your mind and quiets all that chatter, at least for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
But I've really noticed it's made a huge difference in my life, because some things will happen and I'll think, oh, I usually get really stressed about this, but I really do just stay calm now. And I think with that comes this idea that things are gonna work out one way or the other. Everything's gonna be okay. And me being anxious and stressed and all of that isn't gonna help anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, through supporting women, my own practice going through a divorce and things like that, there's so much uncertainty, right? It's not just obviously the relationship that's ending, but is it involving moving? Does it involve, kids being taken out of school, or finances, changing jobs? Like, what does it mean? There's so many
Yeah.
unknowns. And so when you're working with women of starting anew, what are some of the ways that you do break down those steps so that they become, little pebbles of pieces rather than moving that big boulder all at once, or trying to figure out how to get the equipment to do that?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing with that is not thinking 20 steps ahead. I think that's so easy to do, is to get ourselves so worried about where we're going to be in a year or 5 years or 10 years that we lose track of where we are in this moment. And we actually kind of ruin this moment. I remember when I was starting this whole process, I was having panic attacks and I wasn't able to sleep and I wasn't able, eat or any of it, because I was just so overwhelmed by the enormity of the situation. So I think really being conscious of not living in the future and trying to guess and anticipate what it's going to be like, because we have no idea. Really, the way things go, even if we plan it to be that way, it's unlikely it's going to happen. Um, so I think staying in the moment's the most important thing, and just taking it consciously, trying to take it step by step. And then the other part is really putting just as much focus on that, on our own self care. And it's like I always use the analogy when we're on an airplane, if they tell you if the oxygen masks drop, to put yours on first and then on everyone else.
Hmm.
And I love that analogy, because even just in our lives, our daily lives, we need to take care of ourselves first, because that's how we're able to take care of everyone else. So the self care, meditation could be a part of it, but it's also getting the support you need. I really think going through a divorce or something like that without therapy is extremely difficult, and having some kind of support where you're able to process all the different emotions that come up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love what you just shared too about, very early on in your own process of, panic attacks and not being able to eat and not be able to sleep. I think that, speaking to where you're at right now, especially as a helper and healer, it's so evident that you've gone through your process and that you have this amazing gift to connect with women that are starting anew. But the reality is, when you're in base camp, it's pretty gnarly,
Yeah.
And so I think even just being able to normalize that right now in this moment,
Hmm.
for everybody listening, is so huge that that's the beauty in the mess is that the reality is it's pretty messy. Like,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be beautiful, or nor do you have to think you're doing it gracefully. Like it's gnarly.
Yeah. And I love that too, because I love that you just said it's messy, because that's one of the things that I really took out of it is it's okay for life to be messy.
Mhm.
Life is going to be messy no matter what. And it's going to feel really bad and horrible at those times for sure. Um, but I think it's being realizing that how much you need to take care of yourself versus worry about the future and what's going to happen, like taking care of yourself in that moment.
Yeah,
But it's
absolutely.
hard.
Yeah.
So hard.
Yeah, I know there's someone that I'd spoken to about, she going through her divorce, and it was a huge milestone when she started being able to taste food again. Because it
Mhm.
just tasted like cardboard board for so many months that like
Yeah,
that was like this breakthrough. She was like, I can taste food again, and we
right.
like rejoiced in that it was this huge celebration of that was, base camp was eating to be able to care for others,
Yeah,
but knowing all along it just tasted like,
right.
the Sunday newspaper. And so that was just a really cool thing that we were able to highlight of like,
Yeah.
wow, that's progress. Like that's amazing. Food no longer tastes like cardboard.
Yeah, and that's so true because progress, I think, shows itself in the littlest of moments,
Yes,
you
right?
know?
Right? Because you share that with somebody else, they're like, "What? Like,
Right.
why does that seem like a good thing?" But when you're in the trenches and having, a milestone like that occur, it's like, wow, like that actually that's really significant progress.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So you've got this amazing group starting in September, and I'm just so privileged to be kind of, watching you go through this process of launching it because it's just a beautiful thing to see. But tell me, what's your hope from it? Like what do you really or what's your vision with it? Because I just think it's this amazing thing that you're creating in your community and I can't wait to, to see as it blossoms. But what's really your vision with it?
Yeah. Well, my vision with it is really to be able to help women and show them that there's a different way and that there can be positivity and light and all of it to come out of it. I want the group to be able to, for us all to support each other. But I always laugh because when I got the idea of starting this group, I saw the movie Jerry Maguire. And I don't know if there's a divorced women's group in that, but they kind of sit
Oh,
around
that's right.
in the living room and bash men and
Right, right.
complain. And so I don't want that. I want it to be a different experience where it's more about supporting each other and building each other up and helping to find a new positive path that can feel empowering and positive and good and all of that. So I want it to feel a little different than a typical like support group. I think where there's more hope and growth involved. But with any group of women, it really kind of transforms itself, the group into what the group needs in that time, in that moment.
Yeah.
Um, but I just want it to be. I love the idea of women supporting women, and just as since I've gone through this myself, and I know how challenging is the biggest challenge ever of my life to get through. To be able to help other women get through it and kind of show them a path in a way is really it's such an honor to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's such a privilege to be able to sit with other women that are going through it and being able to hold a light to them and say, my path will not look like your path, but I know you're going to come out the other side too. And that's just
Yeah,
an amazing, amazing honor to be able to do that.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Exciting. And like you said too, you get a group of people together and especially a group of women is also it gets to take on its own identity. And
Yeah.
you can be kind of creating the container for it, but that it'll really have that amazing kind of energy that'll flow from it and each group will look different as you go through the process.
Yeah, and that's what I think is so interesting and really fun about these groups is it really on a week to week basis, especially with cuz I limit it to 6 women just because I really want it to feel focused and personal and not feel like too overwhelming. But yeah, just from week to week it's kind of amazing to watch the changes and experiences and start seeing people looking at things maybe in a little different way than they would have. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, something else that just popped in my mind as you were sharing it, I know before we started recording and we were kind of talking, is that there is this divide, unfortunately with women. And I would love to in my lifetime, have my kids experience something differently where that isn't part of, kind of the culture. And, any steps or any connections I can make to lessen that divide is just a really exciting thing for me. But this idea too, that not only are, this group that you're launching with Starting Anew, and also the work that you do individually, but that it also can be this corrective experience in a lot of ways for women to be able to get really amazing support from other women that doesn't come with, should haves or would haves, or it doesn't come with a judgment. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you've so beautifully described, the shame that women can experience going through a divorce, and that if they are in a supportive environment where it's one less person with what you should have done or what you could have done,
Yeah.
that it becomes this corrective experience of really seeing women as just a beautiful support system rather than something that we have to tense up, and be around in fear of judgment or criticism.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to be in a group of women and be able to openly talk about these things that you feel that you may feel so much shame and guilt and fear over, and have it met with supportiveness and positivity and help and whatever is it does change, I think, the way you feel out in the world after that, after you have that experience of actually just getting non-judgmental open support.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And that word should is so funny because I don't know if you talk about this, but I tell all my clients that's my least favorite word in the
Yes.
American language because it's such a heavy judgmental like word. You should have done this or you should have done that. So I say, let's change it to I would have liked to have done this or I would have liked to have done that. And yeah, that should word is probably the worst.
Oh, I love that. That's such a good way to describe it. I actually recorded a podcast a couple weeks ago about like anytime that I'm having a conversation with somebody and they put a should in or a could, is I start to cringe. It's like I'm bracing myself, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a judgment here.
Yeah.
But I like the way that you kind of are working with folks to just re-author of, what I would have liked to have happened is this, but
Yeah.
it didn't.
Yep.
And so instead I'm pivoting this way. It's a good way.
Yeah. It's all about just being softer with ourselves. I think things can be so harsh and rough. And it's like, let's just all be a little softer. I think it was Ian Van Zant, or I think she had the quote I loved that said, don't should on anyone and don't let anyone should on you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And two, thinking about, going through a divorce or any big, experience, there's a lot of betrayal in it. And I know you and I touched on that before we started recording today, that it feels like sometimes life can betray us, when we've got the plan of how it was supposed to happen. And
Yeah.
then it goes so differently. And so we can lose that trust, outside the world, outside in the world, and also internally within ourselves of being able to trust because we feel so betrayed. And so,
Yeah.
this group that you're creating, I think one of the things that I'm just so, excited about is this opportunity also for women to be able to rebuild trust,
Yeah.
within each other, within other relationships, because obviously trust has been broken, irregardless of the reasons for divorce. There's still
Yeah.
trust that's broken, right?
Yep.
And also trust within themselves that they, regardless of how they got there, that they're going to be okay, and that they don't need to look for this, the all things happen for a reason or whatever it is. Like those don't need to be searched for, as
Yeah.
long as you're rebuilding that trust within yourself and trusting that you're going to be okay.
Yeah. I think what you said hits the nail on the head for me. It's really being able to trust that we can handle what comes our way and that our struggles really do hold the potential for so much growth and an opportunity to better ourselves and it's not easy by any stretch, not to diminish any of that, but just to present this other little piece of the pie, which is there can be a lot of hope and growth and that can come out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Well, I want to kind of, tie a bow a little bit because you've been so generous with your time, and I know you've
Yeah.
probably got, different things to get to today, but thinking about, my audience and the women that you work with, is there anything that you want to offer them? Like, as we kind of close up about, this process of starting anew, and we're talking about in the context of divorce today, but anything that you would be able to offer them, not advice, because I'm not an advice giving kind of gal, but any just
Yeah.
kind of perspective or encouragement that you could offer them as we kind of move towards the end of our time together.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that is really helpful to know, because sometimes I think when we're in the midst of so much pain and agony and, what can feel like torture, we feel like there's no way out, or we feel like it's never going to end, or we feel like we're stuck in this. And I think, yes, it can feel that way, but it's really helpful, I think, to know that most emotions, I think they say, last like 90 minutes or something, and then they switch to something else. And if you start sort of paying attention to it, I think you kind of realize that's the case. So I think that's one important thing. Just realizing that as painful as everything can be at that moment, you're not going to be there forever. Things are going to change, and you will adjust, and you will find a way to grow. It's really just depends on the path you want to take around it. But you're not stuck there forever. There's hope. It just doesn't feel like it in that exact moment, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, that it's
Sometimes.
temporary, not permanent is
Yeah.
is a good perspective to have when you're in it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, and I'll definitely I'm going to look for the Deepak Chopra challenge to see if I can link in the show notes for people that are interested in that. Because I think,
Yeah.
just the importance of meditation and being able to realize that you don't necessarily have control over the storm externally, but you have some control internally, and that
Yes.
meditation is just a great tool to use there. But how can people find you? I would love to, connect my audience with you because you've just got so much that you're offering into the world. So how can they
Thank
find you and your
you.
amazing work?
Yes. Well, the best way is probably my website, which is pretty easy. It's just therapywithstephanie.com. And also my website goes to create your best relationships. That's my new
Awesome.
tagline.
I like
uh,
that.
Thank you. Yeah. So either of those websites will take you to my info, and you can find me there, and info about the support group too, if you're in Los Angeles.
Yay, good. Okay, definitely. Yeah, and I'll link that in the show notes too so people can find out. And this episode will be launching before September. So if there's people in the LA area that are really looking for that amazing support, and like you said, a collective group of women that are there to empower and inspire, then we'll definitely, hopefully, they'll be able to connect with you because I'm just so excited for what you're doing.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate it. I'm glad you had me on. Thanks so much.
absolutely. Thank you so much. And yeah, well, I can't wait to stay in touch and kind of see all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, great.
So that was amazing, right? Gosh, I just had so much fun interviewing Stephanie, and just all the information that she had to share was just so valuable. She clearly has a gift in the work that she does, and just so brave to be able to also share about her personal story of when she also went through divorce and just some of the nitty gritty about that. She just has a way of just normalizing exactly what the process is. And I just love how she, some of the things she brought up in terms of how we look at perfection as this, kind of ridiculous thing, but that really it is perfect is going through the struggles and being open to learning from them and growing from them. Perfect is not about, never having anything go wrong in your life and skating through it. And I just think that's such a valuable reminder to all of us that perfection is just showing up and doing life. And that is the beauty. It isn't about having it never go wrong and being able to go through it with ease. And I just love that she highlighted that. Another thing that really stuck out for me in the interview with Stephanie was how she talks about self-awareness being this power. And I really do agree with her there that it's in our self-awareness, it's in our reflection of who we are that we are able to gain this sense of power. And, knowledge is something that is so amazing. And that doesn't necessarily just come from books. It comes from life experience too. And that when we have the knowledge about ourselves, we are able to just do amazing things with it. And so I'm just really, really grateful that Stephanie came on the show. And I know that you guys, have probably some amazing things to share about what she said. And I can't wait for you guys to reach out to either her. She shared her website, and I've got it in the show notes as well, Therapy with Stephanie. So you're able to absolutely connect with her. And I really encourage you to send your voice feedback in via the SpeakPipe app and also via email to me, Anna at herlifeunscripted.com. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback of this idea that self-awareness is power and how we're able to grow and just be more courageous when we have awareness about ourselves, especially going through something like a divorce. And before we end, I want to encourage you guys to hop onto iTunes. Now that we are 13 episodes in, I am just getting to know you guys and being able to hear your voices. And that's really, really exciting. And for those of you that have gone online and left reviews and ratings is so appreciative to be able to have you guys do that. So I really encourage you to hop over to iTunes and be able to leave a review and rate the show, because your guys' feedback is really, really important to me. So I hope you guys have a lovely day, and thank you so much for taking the time today to download the episode and give it a listen. I can't wait to hear your thoughts and your lovely voices as you send in your feedback via the SpeakPipe app and also your lovely emails. Keep them coming. I just could not be more excited when I get them. I look forward to talking to all of you soon. Thank you so much for letting me into your world and into your hearts. I just had a great time interviewing Stephanie, and I know you'll enjoy the episode too. Take care, ladies. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.